Thank you, Ian. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. I would like to acknowledge the elders past and present. This week we saw Australia being singled out around the world because of the way our government dances with brutal regimes around the world. Australian government is being singled out around the world because of the way our government treats asylum seekers and refugees. It is heartbreaking to know that as a Tamil, that in Australia, major political parties not only bash the refugees for political gain. This week we saw Tony Abbott government defending Sri Lanka's human rights record. And we have an opposition that agrees with Tony Abbott government defending Tamil genocide. Tamil refugees flee Sri Lanka for obvious reasons. They flee persecution by the Sri Lankan state. Ladies and gentlemen, Tamils are a nation of people from Tamilulam, northeast of Sri Lanka. We have faced 60 years of war and genocide at the hands of Sri Lankan government since 1948. In 2009, over 70,000 Tamils were killed by the Sri Lankan army. And according to the Catholic bishop in northern Sri Lanka, Bishop Rajaput Joseph, over 146,000 Tamils went missing, many believed dead. In the last 4 years, thousands of Tamils have been killed, tortured, disappeared. The genocide did not stop in 2009. It continues to this date. That is why we have seen quite a lot of Tamils fleeing Sri Lanka. As a Tamil, I find it hard to understand how Tony Abbott, Scott Morrison, Julie Bishop can say Sri Lanka is safe for Tamils when people like the UN Human Rights Commissioner Navi Pillai states that the ongoing oppression and violence in the Tamil homeland continues. Thanks to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting being held in Sri Lanka last week, we have had many reports in the Western media about rapes and torture by the Sri Lankan army. I met up with a Tamil refugee who is residing in Victoria, who is a victim of rape by the Sri Lankan army. He was arrested by the Sri Lankan army for 6 months. He was raped and tortured in Sri Lankan army's custody. He fled to Australia in 2012. And this is what he had to say about his experience. Every time he refused to have sex with the army men, they would insert an Estalon pipe through his anus, and then they put a barbed wire through the pipe and tortured him. When he fled to Australia, the army took his wife. She was gang raped at an army base. She is now living in a refugee camp outside of Sri Lanka, fighting for her life. This is why Tamil refugees come to Australia. This is not a unique story. This is the story of Tamils who are living in the north and east of Sri Lanka. When this is happening to the Tamils, how can Australia demonize Tamil refugees who are seeking our help? Australia should hear the cries of these refugees. Australian government and the Labor Party in opposition must take a strong stand in support of human rights in Sri Lanka and must treat Tamil asylum seekers fairly and generously. Like Ian mentioned earlier, even the British Conservatives have a much stronger stand on the human rights issue in Sri Lanka than the Australian Labor Party. Friends, I want to remind you that what's happening to the Tamils, the torture that Tamils are facing is not the first under the Rajapaksa regime. It has been going on since 1948. I am a victim of Sri Lankan state terror. I came to Australia as a refugee back in 1997 as a 13-year-old unaccompanied minor. Under a different regime, the Chandrika Kumarudunga regime, I witnessed so much horrible acts by the Sri Lankan state. On September 22nd, 1995, my school was bombed by the Sri Lankan army. And a school of over 700 students became a target to the Sri Lankan state. On that day, tens of Tamil children were killed by the Sri Lankan army. On that day, my 14-year-old brother was cut in half by the Sri Lankan state. On that day, I witnessed my classmate, Gobi, hanging on a tamarind tree by his intestines. On that day, we picked up our 6-year-old cousin's body in pieces. These are the memories that I came to Australia with. When I decided to flee Sri Lanka, it was not an easy decision. But I had to make that decision in order to survive. I'll just quickly state that every refugee who come to Australia come with similar experiences and memories. We should be welcoming these refugees rather than demonizing them. And I will wrap up by saying that Tamils are a nation of people fighting for survival. We should come together to help these people. They seek asylum in Australia because of the ongoing atrocities that is taking place in their country. Let us not ignore these people. Let us call on the Australian government to stand side by side with human rights organisations and refugee activists. Let us call on the Australian government to call for an independent international investigation into alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. Let us call on the Australian government to push for an internationally supervised referendum in the Tamil homeland. I thank all of you for being here today in support of refugees who are in need of our help. Thank you.